number 4. Today we'll be talking about a bit of social doctrine, the social doctrine of Vatican II. We're still in doctrine, we're not yet in pastoral errors. Pastoral errors, just reminding you, that would be the practical changes, the things that we would do in this new church. Doctrine is what we think, what we believe. Social doctrine is the doctrine that the church has of society, because the church does have a doctrine of society about how governments should behave, how people should behave in public, what police should do, and so on and so forth. Specifically, today I will talk about the thoughts of Vatican II on marriage. It's interesting to note, first of all, marriage is a social issue. Marriage isn't a private moral issue because families, marriages, are intimately connected with society. So I'll get right into it. Vatican II has a new way of defining marriage. I hope you remember what we were saying earlier about definitions. Definitions are very important to understand the nature of a thing. There used to be an old definition of marriage, which I can't remember it word for word, but goes something along the lines of a couple, a man and woman, who have exchanged vows to each other's bodies. It is permanent, and it is subsistent, and it's exclusive. Vatican II defines marriage, and I'm not going to quote it word for word because it's this big long thing. Vatican II is very verbose, but it says marriage is ordered to procreation and education. Okay, and then it says in this it finds its crowning glory. Now, of course, the modernists of Vatican II, as we've said before, they're too smart to come out with anything that's heretical or completely heterodox, because people would have woken up and said, hey, this is wrong, you can't say that. So they have to invent these subtle ways of saying things that could sound Catholic if you're very generous, but if you're a liberal or if you want to change the Catholic faith, you could easily interpret these things in a bad way. The problem with saying that marriage finds its crowning glory in procreation is that makes procreation sound like something that is heroic in marriage, like the greatest thing that could happen, like the greatest of all possible events that could happen in a marriage. When the simple fact is that marriage exists for procreation. Nothing more, nothing less. In fact, we're seeing the very beginnings here of this modernist obsession with contraception. Modernists and non-Catholics love contraception, and this is still in actuality. It's always present. It's always pertinent because it's still an issue. And of course, New Church would be totally forgiving and be intelligent, don't race, and of course now, most recently with all this ecological nonsense, they'd probably even be saying things like, is it even responsible to have children because they're bad for the environment? That's what they're saying now. And yet they still marry people, because marriage for them, it's not about procreation. It's about love and romance and nonsense. Talk on Friday. This talk was a bit easier in Cork because I was speaking to a room of only men. And so I was quite frank with them. I'm not going to be as frank with you as I was with them, because I am in the presence of men and women. One of the things I was saying to them, and it was good because there were a few young guys, one of the characteristics of just people nowadays is this hyper obsession with romance and sentiment. And sometimes we talk to young people and start talking about marriage, and they'd say things like, there was one time actually one of the priests laid a trap for this young man. He wasn't even 18, but just laid a trap. And says, so what is marriage? Can you tell me about that? And I said, well, when a man and a woman love each other and they decide they want to live together forever because they love each other. And I said, well, it's very difficult to explain to people nowadays that marriage, it's not really about love. It's like that's something that comes later on, not later on in terms of time, but that's not what makes the marriage. Love and all these sentiments and these attractions, God created those things so that we would do these things. I said to the guys in Cork, God created love and all this stuff because otherwise men wouldn't want to get married, because men work and they build stuff and they get stuff, and if there wasn't love or any of this attraction stuff, they'd say, well, get married and give up half my stuff. And of course there's the prospect of children, and many men want to be fathers, so there's that. But my point is that God created these things. It's exactly the same thing with food. It's exactly the same reason that food is delicious and we like food. Because we absolutely have to eat. If we don't eat, we die. We need to drink. Therefore, these things are pleasurable. God He attached a pleasure to these things. And of course, there's two ways of preserving. You can preserve yourself, and that's by eating and drinking, and then you can preserve the human race, and that's by reproducing. And I won't go into specifics, but I'm sure all the adults here know, like there's a pleasure involved in that. And God created that so that we would do it, and the race would be preserved, and humankind would continue. But that's not the thing itself. Marriage is an institution. It is a man and a woman who give themselves to each other permanently so that they can found a family. And it's not, I'd even say it's not so much that they stay together forever because they it's just totally fallen, I'm smitten. It's because it's necessary for a family, and it's necessary for humankind and society that a husband and wife be indissolubly united. That's what it's about. And it's much more so a commitment. But it's a contract, it's an agreement. The husband and the wife, they give rights over their bodies to the opposite spouse. And that's permanent. That's a permanent state of affairs. And all of that is in view of having offspring, having children, and providing for and educating the children. So I hope it's clear to you that the language of Vatican II surrounding marriage, which is procreation, is the crowning glory of marriage. Well, you could imagine something, well, I never attained my crowning glory, but things were pretty good nonetheless. No, if we talk about marriage without the idea of procreation, it's completely empty. People who are known to be sterile before the marriage, it's an impediment. That's how necessary procreation is to the marriage. Next, the language of Vatican II around marriage, it leads to eroticism in marriage. And this should already be clear from what we were just saying a moment ago. Either it's clear that the marriage is for family, or it will be about the selfishness of the spouses. That's kind of the reality. And it's just how it is. The motivation of contraception is hedonism. It's just wildness, party time, pleasure all the time. That's why we would contracept, because we want to do this thing which is fun, but we want to exclude the family part. Family, that's work. That's not fun. This thing is fun, so we find a way artificially to separate the two. That's the motivation behind contraception, and that's why it's a sin. The council says that love in marriage is eminently human, and therefore it enriches the sentiments of the spouses, and it makes deeper the physical expression of their love. I find it kind of surprising that bishops and popes, that they weren't ashamed to publish documents like this. Of course, there are lay authors and secular authors who write these things, whatever. That's a very profane way of speaking. Profane thing. That's not what the church is for, to talk about the physical expression of love in a marriage. It's not. It doesn't really have anything to do with the supernatural end and purpose of the church. And then the other thing is, when you go on and on and on at length about these things, it does eventually get to the point where people's understanding of marriage is all about fireworks and romance and champagne, and that's not what it's about. I imagine married couples here can tell us that marriage, there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of commitment and difficulty, but that it's rewarding in that rather. The greatest joy of the marriage isn't so much like the physical aspect, it's the commitment and knowing that someone is committed to you and you're committed to them for a family. You know what, I will actually end it there, because there were a few other parts here, but I wanted to keep it short. So that was very short, maybe not so sweet, but there you go.